Hey everyone, welcome back to Integrative Psychonautics. Hope you've been doing well out there. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about one of the most common places where I see people are generally stuck when it comes to healing and personal growth, personal transformation, where they're often ending up in kind of loops of emotion, loops of thought, loops of experience, where they're kind of struggling with the issue. So I want to help you identify what needs to happen. If this is you, if you're in this kind of a situation, what needs to happen in order to be able to start to move it, to start to heal it, to start to change it. So let's talk about that. Okay, so a little context and then we'll go ahead and talk about this major point here. So I'd recently just put out a video about the two obstacles that I most often see that are in the way for people's kind of progress when it comes to healing, transformational, leveling up, personal development work. And that as a coach, more often than not, when people come to me, these are universal issues. I'll go ahead and leave a card for it. Should be right about there. And I just want to say that this video is probably one of the most important videos I've ever put out, and yet it's massively underwatched. And that might be because maybe the thumbnail wasn't great, or my title wasn't great, wasn't clickbaity enough, etc. But it's a really core, crucial piece of information, that video. And along those same lines, here in this video, I want to be talking about yet another kind of major piece that, if it isn't present, makes it really hard to heal, move forward, transform, grow, let go, this kind of a thing, right? So what I'm kind of saying here in these videos is that there's kind of a set of preconditions that we want to have in place. And that really makes, whether it's therapy or coaching work or the hypnosis work that I do or psychedelic work, whatever it is, there's some preconditions that need to be in place in order for that work to really go smoothly and effectively and get you the progress, kind of the bang for your buck or the value for your time. And if they're not there, you're generally going to kind of go in circles. It's going to be very slow going. It's going to be very confusing. You're not going to know why things aren't progressing in the way that you'd like them to. So that's my reason for making this video. I want to help you get these preconditions in place so that you can experience the growth, experience the healing, experience the progress, because I get it. There are a lot of you out there who have struggled, and I did too, for years and years and years with the same issue. And it's like, why do I still have this issue? Why am I stuck? Why am I going in loops around this over and over and over? Why do I experience thought loops about this every day? Why do I experience emotion loops about this every day? I'm sure you get me. So that's what I want to talk about today, is one of these other major pieces that needs to be there, that for a lot of people, this is where the growth needs to happen first. So let's talk about it. So the piece that I want to bring to your attention today is this piece of being able to step into our observer mode, would be one way to describe it. If you're familiar with IFS and you think in an IFS approach, this would be also unblending from our parts. So let me describe how this kind of is laid out. One way of understanding the mind and understanding the unconscious and the personality and the identity is that we have parts to our personality or parts to our ego. We have different facets to our personality, right? And this is a normal part of developing as a human being, where we have, maybe sensitive parts, we have really tough parts, we have really mature adult parts, we have really childlike parts, we have, maybe parts that are really driven and full of motivation, other parts that are really like weak and vulnerable and soft and tender, etc., etc., etc. And then we have our wholeness, right? So our wholeness is our observer self. It is what you might think of as your higher self, as your core self, as your true self. It is the you that is the broad, expansive container inside which these different parts of your personality exist. Now, generally speaking, in order to properly heal and transform, we need to be able to step into our observer mode and relate to our parts from this observer mode. Now, there are different ways we can think about this. So, observer, higher self, spiritual self, like I just said. And what we want to create here, the dynamic we're trying to create, again, is this secure relationship with ourself. In specific, a secure, patient, safe relationship between our observer self and our parts, right? So generally speaking, when we're talking about, issues, when we're talking about things that need healing, that need resolving, what's going on here is that we have our parts communicating things that are unresolved in our unconscious mind, things that are unresolved in our psyche, aspects of, dynamics from our past, experiences we had, memories, emotions, things we haven't figured out, struggles, challenges, conflicts, this kind of stuff. And our parts hold these conflicts or these struggles or these issues, right? And generally speaking, our parts come up and they bring this to the surface. And a part is it's almost like a sub-personality. It's like a segmented part of your personality that specializes in holding that pain or that fear or that issue and bringing it up, and it's organized around that, right? So the part's job in some degree is to bring up this charged emotion for you to experience, and sometimes it's, to help you understand this part of yourself, or it's a way of motivating you or a way of formatting your view of life around you. I feel like I'm kind of digressing here or kind of all over the place. We have these parts, and these parts hold emotions. These emotions are often charged. Now, for most of us, for your average person, we don't realize that we have an observer self, that we have different parts of our personality, and that we can switch fluidly between these different parts or fluidly into an observer self, and that there are dynamics and relational pieces between all these different parts of our personality. For your average person, we assume that we are kind of one egoic structure, one egoic identity, and that the different thoughts and feelings that occur inside of us are all coming from the same place in us. And therefore we identify with everything that moves through us, right? Now, that creates a lot of problems. Most of all, we're not sorting between different levels of our being, right? We're not sorting between parts and observer, parts and wholeness, if you want to think of it that way. We are everything is the same. Everything on the same level. Everything's on the same degree of size and proportion, right? So because of this, we end up getting what's called blended with our parts. We identify with our parts. We get caught up in our parts. And our parts can have, logic from, whatever age we were at when it was formed. So it may have thoughts and emotions of a 10-year-old, of a 6-year-old, of a 3-year-old, right? Of a 15-year-old, of a what have you. And the part, again, is organized often around a particular worldview, a particular way of being, a particular, dynamic, so it might be a defensive part that's there to protect you against, an unfair relationship dynamic or something like that. And so if we are confused about, that part and our wholeness, and we blend the wholeness and the part, then it's really hard to change. It's really hard to move that. It's really because I am my feelings. I am my thoughts. These thoughts that move through me are my truth. They are my wholeness. They are my whole experience, right? But if we can move into an observer mode and back into a greater wholeness, recognizing that this thought and this emotion and this moment is only one expression of part of me and not the entirety of my experience, then we have some leverage to move and change and heal things. I hope this is making sense. This is really important. So a lot of times when people come to me as a coach, one of the places they're hung up is they're wanting to vent, they're wanting to offload these emotions. They're stirred up around this thing, they're struggling with this thing. It's pain, it's anger, it's fear, it's overwhelm, it's trauma, whatever it is. And they are blended with the part. So they have no overview. They have no ability to observe. They have no ability to witness it and relate with it because they are inside it. It's hijacking them, as parts do. Parts hijack us. And so this is one of these preconditions to really good, effective work and good, effective change. And this is a major tool that becomes very useful in psychedelic work. right? Obviously, if you're having parts expressed through you in a psychedelic state, and you know to recognize that they're parts and remain in your wholeness and contain them and relate to them in a loving, safe, secure way, that could be very healing. That also gives you the ability to have these wild, strange thoughts that come up without being, again, sucked into them, identified with them. You can just witness them and be present with them without having them kind of like hijack your experience of life. This also becomes really useful in the sense that psychedelics can teach you how to become more in your observer mode. So I'll be frank here. One of the first places I got a really good experience of being in self-observation, of just simply being present with myself, witnessing what was happening in me without being attached to it or caught up in it or all enmeshed in it, was during a psychedelic experience. So I think psychedelics can be great teachers of how to get into observer mode, but I also think this is something to learn in work before you do psychedelic work so that you have a sense of how this goes and it just becomes easier and easier and easier. This is one of the major obstacles, again, that if we're being blended in our parts, it just stops us from really progressing. But when we get into that expansive kind of observer mode, then we're able to create this safe relational space with the part. So I hope this is making sense. I know this is a little complicated. I apologize. I'm a little kind of feeling groggy. I'm not cognitively at my clearest or sharpest, but I hope this is making sense. I want to give you a quick example of how and why this is a problem, because oftentimes when I kind of start to have this conversation with my clients, there will be some amount of, let's say, resistance or not fully buying into this as important. And they may be like, well, yeah, but my emotions are me, my emotions are important, and all of that is true on one level. But I want to illustrate why being unblended from your parts as part of your healing, personal growth process is super key. And I'm going to speak about something a little bit heavy here. So maybe a little bit of a trigger warning if you're sensitive to talking about heavy topics, okay? Invariably, if you look at when people do heinous things, whether we're talking, suicide, whether we're talking violent acts like school shooters, whether we're talking just impulsive, dumb, self-destructive things that people do, if you're able to ask them, why did you do this? What was, how did this make sense? Why? People will inevitably share some piece of unhealthy logic, some piece of unhealthy emotion. Well, I just had this voice inside of me that said X, Y, Z, whatever it was, whatever the bad decision was, right? And because they're blended with the part, there's no ability to look at these kinds of thoughts, these irrational thoughts and feelings, which quite frankly, I think most people have some sort of weird, impulsive, dark, unhealthy, irrational things that arise through us, right? That sometimes would prompt us to do really unwise things, right? But if we have no ability to observe that as simply a voice, a feeling, a current moving through us, but rather we identify fully and completely with that, that's where we end up making these really dangerous, bad decisions that are quite frankly tragic. So unblending from your parts is a way to save yourself from being hijacked and sucked into some of the flawed logic that will inevitably float through you and move through you, right? So this is a part of self-regulation. There was another point I want to make here. Yeah, I lost it. So we'll go ahead and kind of summarize here and kind of finish the video. So basically, this is one of these major keys that you need to start to be able to heal, to start to create healthy self-relationship. So I'll be talking more about this because there's actually a way this all fits together that is at the heart of self-healing, personal transformation, personal growth. But essentially, if safe, secure self-relationship is the major tool we need for healing and quite frankly, the major resource that's missing for most people, The other part of that is that implies we need to be able to be in an unblended relationship where we are in our observer self, we're in our wholeness, our broader self. That's right. I remembered what the other piece was. And as we're in our wholeness, then we're able to relate to our parts and the charged emotion of our parts from a place of non-judgment, of non-abandoning, of secure, safe connection. I wanted to give one more example, now that I remember it, of how this becomes problematic. So think of it this way, because I realize there's resistance around the idea of parts in the psyche. I can understand why there would be questions around that. And some people kind of are like, well, how does this work? I have all these parts, but I'm also a whole, and how does that make any sense? Think of it like this. Your finger, right? Your fingertip is not the whole of your body, but it is a part of your body, right? If you let's say you're cutting some veggies on a cutting board and you accidentally cut your finger, right? It's a very normal, common thing that happens. And let's say it's kind of a deep cut and it's bleeding and it's like you really cut your finger. If you are identified with the wholeness of your finger, if all you can experience is the tip of your finger in that cut, that's going to feel like a massive emergency and like the end of the world and totally overwhelming. And it's going to totally dominate your attention and you're going to have no idea what to do, right? If you could imagine such a thing. But if you're able to, again, remain in your wholeness and be like, oh, my finger's cut. Oh, there's pain here. Oh, there's blood here. Oh, I need to take care of this. And you're in your wholeness. It can be scary. It could be concerning, but it's not, it doesn't dominate your whole experience in the same way, right? And so it's the same thing here with the psyche. This is so important to understand that we need to be in our wholeness relating to our wounds, not inside the wound, blended with it, caught up in it, enmeshed in it. One last way of thinking about this, and then we'll go ahead and wrap the video here. My apologies if this is rambling. If this doesn't make sense to you, please do let me know. I'm happy to reshoot it and try to clarify my ideas. I'm sure I will at some point again anyways. Another way of thinking about this is there's kind of a famous quote from Einstein. I'm probably going to butcher it here, but I'll give the essence of it, which is that you cannot solve a problem with the same type of thinking that created the problem in the first place. So essentially what Einstein's saying is if you're thinking at one level or one kind of paradigm, you have to move to a higher paradigm, a higher level of thinking in order to be able to problem solve the problem. You can't be caught up in the problem dynamic and solve it that way. You have to get outside of the problem. You have to get some perspective, some altitude on it, and then you can understand it better. Then it makes sense. Then you can find new solutions because you're not caught up inside of it. It's the same thing inside of ourselves. One of the major missing pieces that, again, most people tend to struggle with, and this is what keeps you stuck in the problem and stuck in, having it year after year, is that you haven't gotten outside of the problem enough. You haven't gotten the altitude. You haven't gotten into a clean observer mode, a clean kind of wholeness, a clean higher self to be able to relate to the problem and start to, bring some, resource to it. Last thing I'll say, and then we'll wrap the video, is that in my experience, when we're in this observer mode, when we're in our wholeness, we generally tend to feel resourced. We generally tend to feel patient, at peace, capable of addressing the issue, perhaps filled with love and tolerance and compassion, much more ease, much more of a sense of well-being and safety. So this is really the first order of business. You can't really fix what needs fixing in your life if you aren't able to get into a resourced place. So the first thing you want to do is learn how to get into this observer mode, into this wholeness experience. And then from there, you can start to work on your issues. This is also fundamentally what mindfulness is. This is also fundamentally what meditation is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I could yammer on about it, and I'm sure I will in future videos, but let's wrap there so as not to make this video too long. So in summary, one of the major things, if you're stuck, is to get into this observer mode. So much love to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.